All right, guys, so we are looking at something called rational functions for this chapter. So, our final chapter, chapter 7 here. And we are going to start today with something called inverse variation. So, this is page 192 in your student journals. Okay, so again, you should not only be following along and taking notes by writing things down, but also making sure you understand what is being said, backing up the video as you need to, asking friends questions, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so inverse variation. This is kind of in that middle of page 192. There are a few very important things here we need. So y is said to vary inversely with x. So when that happens, this is our equation that we get. So y equals a divided by x. So a is just some constant number. It can be anything but 0. Okay, so the most important thing to note here is that we are dividing by x, or dividing by our variable. So something you also want to add, I want you to add this down into the notes here, is something called direct variation. And you have seen this one before, but probably never really called it that. So direct variation, instead of y equals a divided by x, is y equals ax. So it's the same idea, except for a and x are being multiplied, where up here is a divided by x. Here we have a times x. Okay, we're going to go to page 193 then. Okay, so for 1 through 9 here, all they're asking is whether we see direct variation, inverse variation, or neither. Okay, so we're going to be looking back here to say, do we have some value being divided by x or some value being multiplied by x, or neither? So what you want to do, you can't really tell unless you have that y by itself. So in all of these, you want to get y by itself initially, so you can tell what type of variation it is. So here, if I'm multiplying y by 3x, I would have to divide each side by 3x. So I would get y equals 1 over 3x. Now, since this x is in the bottom, that is going to be inverse variation. So I'm going to put a big I for inverse for this one. Here, y is already by itself. I have some number being divided by x, so that again would have to be inverse. Okay, here again, y is by itself. Now, we don't have anything in either of these with an addition sign. It's always some value divided by x or some value multiplied by x. So this one would be neither. So if you feel like you've got the hang of this, this would be a good time to pause and go ahead and finish off the rest of that section. So we're going to go all the way through number 9 here. So if you feel like you've got a hang of it, go ahead and try these, and then come back and see how you did. All right, so for number 4 here, to get y by itself, I would have to subtract x. So I'd get y equals -2 minus x, which is not inverse or direct because it's not something being multiplied or divided by x. So that's going to be a neither. Okay, here I have y by itself already, and I have 4/5 being multiplied by x. So just because there's a fraction doesn't mean it's going to be inverse. It depends on where x is. If x were in the denominator, it would then be inverse variation. But this is just 4/5, which is some number, times x. So this is going to be direct variation. Next one here, so I would have to subtract x from each side. So now I really don't even need to finish this, because I can already tell, even after I divide by 8, I'm going to have some value minus something with an x in it, which does not follow that form for direct or inverse variation. So I can already tell this one's going to be neither. Okay, again, if you feel like you've got the hang of this, go ahead and try these 3 on your own and come back and see. All right, so we've got y by itself already. We have x divided by 7. So you might see that division and think this has got to be inverse, but the x is on top here. So this is like the same thing as saying 1/7 x equals y. And x is really being multiplied by a value. It's being multiplied by 1/7. So this is going to be direct. Okay, next one here, to get y by itself, I'm going to have to divide by 6x. Divide each side by 6x. So let's see, 0 divided by anything is just 0. So for us, that's going to be a neither, because that x ends up going away. All right, last one here, to get y by itself, I have to multiply each side by 9x. So I get y equals 1 times 9x is 9x. So this is 9 times x, so this would be direct. Okay, so we're going to keep moving along here. We're going to go on the next page. We're not going to do 10 through 12. We're going to jump to number 13 then. Okay, this is kind of what we're really focusing on today then. Okay, so they are telling us the variables x and y vary inversely. Use the given values to write an equation relating x and y, then find y when x equals 5. So we're going to start by that writing an equation piece, and I need to remember y equals a over x when I do this. Okay, so it's going to be what we start with here. So when doing this, in order to figure out what y is when x equals 5, I need to first figure out this a value. So I'm going to use these values that they give us here to figure out what a is. So in y equals a over x, I'm replacing y with 2 and x with 2. So I get 2 equals a over 2. Okay, so if I multiply each side by 2 then, we would see that a is equal to 4. Okay, so my first step is to write my equation. So my equation is y equals 4 over x. Okay, so we did the first thing that they asked for, right? An equation relating x and y. The last thing to do is figure out what y is when x is equal to 5. So that's as simple as just substituting in a 5 for x. So y equals 4 over 5. And we would just leave it like that then. Okay, not so bad. If you feel like you've got the hang of it, you can go ahead and try the next one on your own. All right, so again, I'm going to find a first here. So we know y is 3 when x is 6. So to get a by itself, I would multiply each side by 6. So we have a equals 18. So then to write my actual equation, I would have y equals 18 over x. So there's my equation. And now they want to know y when x is equal to 5. So same idea, I'm going to substitute in that value of 5. So y equals 18 fifths. So you can leave it like that, or you can find the decimal if you really want to. Either way is fine. All right, so again, if you feel like you're getting the hang of this, go ahead and try 15 and 16 and then come back and see how you did. Okay, so same idea. I've got some fractions here though. So y equals a over x, which is 20 here. So to get a by itself, I would have to multiply each side by 20. So this one, even though I started with a fraction, ends up not being too bad because the 20s cancel and I just have 7 equals a. So then my equation is y equals 7 over x. And still under those same directions where they want us to substitute in a 5. So we would have y equals 7 fifths. And we'll just go ahead and leave it like that. All right, last one we're going to try like this before we get to some word problems. So same setup. Again, if you feel like you've got the hang of this, it would be great to try one on your own and come back and see how you did. Okay, so y equals a over x, or y equals, or 3 over 2 equals a over 10 ninths. Okay, so here, I'm going to multiply each side by 10 ninths to get rid of that denominator. Don't let the fractions scare you. So this all goes away. And over here, we're multiplying by 10 ninths. Okay, so I've got a fraction. So I'm going to multiply straight across the top and across the bottom. So I get 30 over 18. And then I want to simplify that. So let's see. I can divide both of those by 6. So 30 divided by 6 is 5. 18 divided by 6 is 3. So A is 5/3, which gives us our equation here of y equals 5/3 over x. Okay, so another way to write this would just be y equals 5 over 3x. Either way, they're both equivalent. Okay, and then we want to substitute in a 5. So y equals 5 over 3 times 5 would be 15. And 5 over 15 is just 1/3. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and try these last two word problems on the page here. So we're going to get two different variables. We're not going to have x and y anymore. Okay, so they say when temperature is held constant, the volume V of a gas is inversely proportional to the pressure P. Okay, so that's the most important part here. V is inversely proportional to the pressure P. So V and P vary inversely is another way to read that. So we have V equals A over P is what we should be getting from that. Okay, so instead of with x's and y's, we just have V and P. A pressure of 32 pounds per square inch results in a volume of 20 cubic feet. So this is telling me when P is 32, right, they say a pressure of 32 pounds per square inch results in a volume of 20 cubic feet. What is the pressure if the volume becomes 10 cubic feet? Okay, so this is like that set that they give us. This is just like this here where they gave us an x and a y that go together. And then we have that other value we want to find or want to solve for. Okay, so I'm going to substitute in my V and my P. So 20 equals A over 32. Okay, so I multiply each side by 32. I get 640 equals A. So then I want to write my equation in terms of V and P. So V equals 640 over P. Okay, so then they say, what is the pressure if the volume becomes 10 cubic feet? So now I know the volume is 10, and I want to figure out that pressure using this equation here. So volume is 10, so 10 equals 640 over P. Okay, so this is a little bit different than the ones we've been doing because we're used to solving for this variable over here, but it's going to work the same way. We just have an extra step. So to get rid of the fraction, I'm going to multiply each side by P. So 10, or P times 10 is 10P. And on the right side, those P's cancel out just to be 640. And then divide each side by 10. So P is equal to 640 divided by 10 is 64. And I want to make sure I include some units here. So this is a pressure. So let's see what the other units for pressure are. So a pressure of 32 pounds per square inch are my units. So pounds per square inch. This is the way we write that. Okay, so if you're feeling okay about this, go ahead and try 18 on your own and come back and see how you did. Otherwise, I'll do this one with you guys too right now. So they say the time T in days that it takes to harvest a field varies inversely with the number N of farm workers. So that makes sense. The more workers you have, the quicker it's going to go. So we have T varies inversely with N. So, in other words, T varies inversely with N. It says a farmer can harvest his crop in 20 days with 7 farm workers. So they're telling me when T is 20, N is 7. So we're going to use that information to find A here. So 20 equals A over 7. Okay, multiply each side by 7 here. So we get 140 equals A. So I can now write my equation. So T equals 140 divided by N. Okay, so now they say, how long will it take to harvest the crop if he hires 10 farm workers? So they're telling us N is 20, or excuse me, 10. And we want to know what T is. He wants to know how long. So T is the time variable here. Okay, so we have T equals 140 divided by, we know N is 10. Okay, so 140 divided by 10 is just 14. So T is just 14. We want units here. So the time T in days. So it must be 14 days.